Good morning, everybody. I hope this video finds you well. Today what I want to do is talk a little bit about all that quanta stuff that I've been talking about over the last week or so, and all those little colored balls, what I call quanta. And while I said that they represent whatever is the prevailing theory, whether it's string theory or brain theory, brains, or whatever the theory is, it doesn't really mean that much. The idea is that there's little tiny components of particles, and the particles are known as quanta. So let me just I'm going to repeat that a second time. The particles are known as quanta, and they're composed of smaller components, which are generally shapes. These shapes are multidimensional and very, very tiny. And you'll see in this video how I illustrated the components of the quanta is illustrated by Lego blocks. I use my daughter's Lego blocks for this. They're a little bit larger than your standard Lego blocks, which is fine because it makes it easier for you guys to see. So those little balls are made up of these Lego blocks. And if you can imagine somehow a representation of a ball filled with various Lego blocks in different forms and shapes, that's what we're talking about here. There really shouldn't be too much difficulty in understanding that, because after all, everything is made up of things. Houses are made up of bricks, if you're in a brick house, right? And bricks themselves are made up of materials that are bonded together, so, and sintered. So yeah, that's the basic thing we're going to be talking about here. So why is this important? Well, the reason why I'm doing this is to give you insight. It's not going to be anything that's going to be directly pertaining to your life, but it will give you insight. Let's wind the clock back. We're talking domain right now. Domain is trillions and trillions of years old. Just older than the universe. The universe is 13 billion years old. Domain is trillions of years old. And over this period of time, they have we call it a spiritual creature, but as a transdimensional entities, have mastered manufacturing and construction at a fine level. Talk a little bit about the building blocks of quanta. String theory holds that all quanta is made up of strings. We don't know what the shape is because they're very, very small, but we're going to use this Lego block to represent a string. We don't know if string theory is correct or if it's wrong or anything about that, but in general, there's small things that have a shape. And we know that the orientation changes the value and the abilities of this quanta. So this is quanta. This is quanta, and now it's a different quanta. And now it's an even different quanta. And now it's another different quanta. We know that quanta can interact with other quanta at a distance, but when they interact, they form another kind of quanta. See how it works? And the more interactions that you have, the greater the complexity becomes. You can well imagine, right? Did you notice how the background changed color? That's not Photoshop. That's no video manipulation. That's a trick of the camera. But it illustrates quite well how changing orientation of quanta can change its properties in the surrounding sphere of influence. Quanta is a very interesting subject of mine.
Much more than the couple of thousand of years of technology we have. They're trillions of years compared to our thousands of years. And while we're busy figuring out how to make metals and different alloys and stuff, they've way mastered the components of quanta. And when they decide to create a doll body or make a vehicle to move their doll bodies around, because that's what those things are, right? They don't need to have a vehicle. They just zip around because they're multidimensional. But when they need to have a presence, they create a physical vehicle, and then they have doll bodies or various bodies that inhabit that vehicle. And at times they can even occupy an organic body, but they do so. So the question is, how do these vehicles work? How do they animate these doll bodies? What's the system? And the system is these Lego blocks, these components of quanta. So I don't want you all, and the point of this video is I don't want you all to think that quanta is the smallest items in the universe. They're actually composed of smaller components, which we can call brains or string theory or whatever, in different alignments.
One of the things about quanta is that we don't really understand it. We know that in quantum physics there are theories to what it is. There's brains, there's string theory, and all sorts of other things. But for now, I am going to simplify things a little bit. Each quanta that I have here represented by this ball actually represents a complex series or arrangement of quanta. Let's have a look-see. Let's look close. So instead of this being a ball, let's look close as to what that ball is, okay? This ball is this. And inside of this ball is not just one singular piece of quanta. It's easy enough for us to recognize it as one singular piece of quanta, but it's really not. It's actually multiple pieces of quanta of different sizes and shapes and configurations. All of these quanta interact with each other in different ways. We don't need to know the mechanism so much as to understand that it does exist and it does interact with each other. And here is one ball of quanta, which is really comprised of smaller quanta in different shapes and everything. We don't have a language for that. So I just call this quanta and this quanta, because does it really matter about the shape of what's going on inside? To you and me, all we care about is that there's quanta. That's it. So let's move this ball of quanta to the side, and let's get another quanta. And in this quanta, we also have other components. Maybe they look something like this, huh? With different strings or membranes or brains or whatever the latest fad and fashion is in calling these things out. And you'll notice that the quanta has different arrangements. They don't look the same. Eventually, these balls, these things can grow up to be bigger quantum elements such as quarks and bosons and all kinds of other exotic things. But we're talking at the smallest level. So let's look over here, and we're going to look back. This is your physical skin suit that's comprised of a non-physical body and a bunch of quanta. If you look at the individual quanta, you'll see that it is comprised of quantum elements, whether they're called brains or strings or whatever, or Lego blocks, it doesn't matter. Okay? And that's what quanta is. It looks like a lot of fun to play with if you were a kid, or of youthful interests. Don't you think? Don't you know? So let's recap here so we don't forget. This quanta is actually something that contains smaller elements, whether they're brains or strings, in an arrangement. And this quanta, and this quanta, and this here quanta comes in different sizes and shapes. This is blue quanta, but there's memory quanta, energy quanta, quanta having to do with intelligence, quanta as building blocks for body, all types of quanta. And that's some of the basics about the building blocks of quanta. Now,
when the United States government or Majestic started investigating these vehicles, they discovered this weird writing system on these panels that programmed panels to behave in certain ways. And while we could work back in the 80s, 1980s, we could work out systems. Well, if you have this system connected to this system, you have that result. We could never really get to understand the technique, how we could relate that this language caused this thing to do something, but we could never say how it did it. Now that might be completely different right now. Maybe. I don't know. But what I'm here to tell you is the how. For reasons of convenience, I like to consider this little black marble as memories. And I've pretty much been saying so throughout the videos. This little black thing represents quanta associated with your memories.
Here you are. You're looking at this video and this represents you, but let's talk about your soul. Your soul is a construct, a vehicle that consists of a bunch of quanta. It may be inside a universe or may not. Many humans actually have a soul that exists within a universe, a pocket universe, which we call as heaven. Let's put your soul inside of heaven for now. This, of course, is the heaven universe. And let's go ahead and get another universe out here. This is the green universe. We can call this the reality universe. And that's the universe where you live. To travel from this universe to this universe, we need an intermediary, which is known as the manted, which is a higher energy state that will guide you. We know them as guardian angels. But let's consider for a minute the construction of the quanta inside of here and there. Okay? I replaced that shot glass of your quanta with the quanta showing its individual components. As you can tell, it's a bunch of Lego blocks, no big deal, and it's stuck in this universe. These Lego blocks are the lower energy Lego blocks. They don't have enough energy to jump out of this universe. Each one is a low energy component. It can't jump out. That's why you need help. Help can come whenever a higher energy being or quanta attaches itself to your quanta. In this case, let's imagine that we've got a very high energy quanta. It's part of your soul, and it's comprised of high energy quanta. And what happens is the quanta in this high energy, or the individual quantum components of this ball of high energy quanta, may end up being something that's much more elaborate in construction as opposed to the components in the lower energy quanta. And when these higher energy quantum components are latch on or have a relationship with these, as shown here, they can provide energy to leave this universe and go wherever. The key, and the point that I'm making in this crude, very, very crude way, and the key and the sole purpose of this is to show how the individual quantum components are what's the mechanism that enables the lower energy quanta to move transdimensionally, transuniversal, to move to another universe. It's the components, not the quanta. And thus, if you're a higher energy being or a higher order being with lots of quanta, you can rearrange your quanta to fit certain tasks. You can clone quanta, create quanta, move quanta around, and thus have some kind of device that you can create that you can use to interface with the baseline quanta that is associated with your physical body. Guys, I'm afraid I lost you on this. If I did, I'm very, very sorry. I didn't mean to.
These memories in itself consists of a bunch of quanta in various configurations. And it in itself is a thing. A memory is a thing. Now, consider this. Here's another piece of quanta. This is high energy quanta. I like to use the yellow as high energy quantas, and this rose as a kind of a low energy quanta. So here's a low energy quanta, and it too is composed of stuff right, in some kind of weird configuration. And we know that the low energy stuff can be torn apart, reorganized, set together. That's me right here. They took the quanta from a bunch of other really bad people and made me, I guess. And they kind of tore it apart and said, this is a good part. We're going to use this for MM. And thank you, Mades Escapulon, for this part. But let's go back to this one. If they can do that with components, can't they do that with memories? Yes, they can.
So let's kind of simplify things. It's not that the quanta associated with some other being is what brings you out, but rather it is the arrangements of quanta at a higher level that interface with your quanta or your quantum components. The quantum components of the higher energy creature interfaces with the quantum components of your lower energy body that enables you to be teleported or transferred out of this universe. That is why it is important to either work with your Manted, find another being that's high energy, work with the domain, or work with something else to get the higher energy components, because the quanta that you have as part of your body does not have the skills to create other quanta and does not have the skills to raise your own personal energy level. That takes practice. Though I will admit that there are certain oriental techniques that have been attempting to do just that and have reached and have been approaching the kinds of energies that you need to be able to launch yourself out.
Will they? Well, the impression I get is that memories are very, very important and are big treasures. They're treasures. and that the domain are loath to mess with your memories. Also, there's a difficulty involved, which they're also loath to advance upon. So they're not going to mess with your memories. But the fact is, memories can be messed around. They can be reorganized. They can be set apart. They can be stored. All kinds of stuff can happen with memories. And why is that important? Well, number one, it means that if memories are like this, perhaps they can be torn apart and then reassembled from components, or cloned and put back in place. So for those of you who are concerned about the erasure of all your memories, the theory, as I understand it, is this is what domain scientists will be working on when resource allocation occurs. Yeah, I know you want to know that they're working on it right now. I'm sorry, they're not. It's a resource allocation issue. But there's no rush, because there's only a handful of domain members that need to have their memories reestablished. So there's going to be a little wait. Long time for you if you're a human. 500 years. Short period of time in terms of domain. 500 years is nothing. So that's the one point. Another point here is the construction of bodies. There's different bodies that are constructed depending on your social hierarchy within the domain society. You've got animated doll bodies, you've got the ability to go in and out of organic life, and you've got these they call them robot bodies for the military and all kinds of other stuff going on. These bodies are, of course, constructed of quanta, which in turn is constructed of components. If you're in a caste, a military caste, or a leadership caste inside of domain, the body, the building blocks of the quanta is custom to you. You can't have a leadership take over a military body and a military person take over a leadership body. The parts don't fit because they're organized differently. This gives you a little insight. It also gives you an insight, while even though the United States government through Majestic has had various domain craft and other craft, and they have been Majestic has been working to figure things out and learn from it. This connection between this and mind and writing hasn't been breached. You're not seeing the United States run around with fleets of UFOs, okay?
Understanding how quanta is composed of quantum subcomponents, we can then, if you have enough technology, create mechanisms to achieve certain goals by aligning quanta into certain configurations. And you can create these mechanical devices so that they interact with each other. And that's how a lot of these domain spacecraft components work. The materials are made up of quantum submaterials, each one that has a programmed behavior that they can program on the fly. And that's a very, very big subject for another time, if ever. We have to understand that a species, a race, a society that has the ability to create universes and configure mechanisms based on quantum level mechanics certainly has the ability to alter your quantum structure to fit other needs. And isn't that what has been reported in all the extraterrestrial lore and writings on the alternative websites? Well, people, this is how it works. Not that you're going to plan on doing anything like this, but you need to understand that it's not just little round balls you're working with. The balls represent a cluster of components such as this.
One of the problems with the United States secrets is when you finally get a guy who's really a genius and figures this one out, and you have another guy who's a genius and figures this one out, but you keep them separate in a wall of secrecy, the two don't ever connect. So there's really no benefits made. It's like this. I worked at a company, Holmes Products, and I was there. I was hired as a project engineer, and then I became head of the R&D group. But my functional role was the inventor. Marketing would come on over and they'd say, they would say, Black & Decker is doing this gadget and appliance. We want a copy. We want to do something just like that, only better, because everybody likes it. And so a lot of the work in industry is, he's doing that, we must do it. They're doing that, we must do that. But as an inventor, a gadgeteer, I was constantly throwing together stuff, new ideas, making the prototypes and throwing it out and saying, hey, do you think you could sell this? Giving us, Holmes Products, a leading role in new stuff that, of course, the realtors really liked. I guess I had a knack for it. I guess I still have a knack for it for some strange reason, but it doesn't matter. Understanding how things fit together gives you clarity on how things can be used and utilized. Sure, you are not going to go ahead and reorganize your quanta. You are not going to construct yourself a doll body, but you have a better understanding on how and why these different quanta exist, their limitations, and how they fit together with other things. It's not just that this rose-colored quanta is lower energy than this yellow quanta. It's that the components comprising it are different shapes, sizes, with different attributes and different abilities. Right? How does this matter? How does this matter to you? Well, you as consciousness, and consciousness This is consciousness, guys. It's comprised of a relationship of quanta. A quanta builds to a quanta. Quanta can interact and create something, and it's the building blocks within the quanta that kind of fit together. So you can argue, why do we even bother with quanta? Why don't we just talk about the building blocks? Well, because these building blocks form shapes, and these shapes repeat themselves over and over and over again. Okay? You've got this yellow 4 connector. You've got this little red 2 connector. They form these shapes over and over and over again. So we just call those things quanta. Of course, quanta can be huge. If you look at a Lego construction, it might be a TIE fighter or an apartment building. They can be huge. You know what I mean? Have you ever seen those Legos where they build an apartment building out of Legos, or a spaceship from Star Wars out of these Legos? Yeah, like that. So yeah, those can be individual quanta. So quantas can be large. Quanta itself and the building blocks of itself are all multidimensional, except for this. When it gets to the lower energy stuff, it crosses a threshold and becomes the physical stuff. These thresholds vary from universe to universe. In certain universes, it's all high energy. In other universes, it's all low energy. In other universes, it's stratified, which is the reality universe that we're a part of. It's stratified. And and so you have these gradients, these levels, which is why I used those my child's toy there to show you the various levels. Of course, it's much more complex than that, right? Yeah, see? It's much more complex than this, okay? But this is just illustrative. All this is just illustrative stuff. Help you understand things a little bit better. And just like this little toy, you know, it can move and bend and all kinds of, it's all very flexible. It's all function of thought. The only thing that these trans-dimensional entities, the ISBs, can do is think, generate thoughts, interact with each other, create universes, and play with their quanta. Those are their limitations. Thought generation. Manipulate quanta. Generate universes. And communicate to each other. Those are what they can do. There's probably other things that they can do that I am unaware of, but those are the big 4. Does it matter to you that there may be 16 others, 136 other things that they can do? It shouldn't at this point in time. If you are like most people, you just want to get the fuck out of here, out of this situation. Everything else is gravy once that happens. If you are like me, once you egress from this environment, entering a physical body will be the last thing you ever want to do ever again. You know? Tell me if I'm wrong, huh? The makeup, so in the future, of course, we're going to still keep with the narrative. We're going to still talk about quanta as being balls, and quanta being composed or comprised of individual components known as these Lego blocks. And these quanta come can be changed. The shape may stay the same, relative shape, as far as we conceptualize shape, can change as a function of energy. So thus you have something which resembles this, where you can have high energy, low energy, and all kinds of stuff like that, and you can place things in there. Okay? Even for such things as memories have a hierarchy within these bodies, have a hierarchy in ability. And that's how things work. So let's kind of summarize everything and put them all together for understanding purposes, right? Why this is important is it shows the relationship why an ISB domain member would create a vehicle or a body in this region. Why they would do so and how they would do so. You also see that the technology to create a doll body is very similar to that of the technology to create a vehicle. You can also see, given what I'm showing here, is that there's no technology that the earth possesses or humans possess that can fight, do battle, or thwart any domain. They are so far beyond comprehension that it's not even funny. Okay, so any of this stuff saying that domain, the Greys are hostile, they're Zeta Rokulis and they want to take over the world and stuff is just complete nonsense and bullshit. They're transdimensional creatures. They can create their own fucking universe, populated with zillions of planets if they wanted to. This little tiny Earth isn't all that fucking special. In fact, it is not really a desirable place. So, there you have it. Domain are interested in the herding, cultivation, and maintenance of the ISB entities that have been trapped in this environment. They're trying to, overall, they're trying to really cleanse out this entire universe, clean it up, because it kind of got way out of hand. And and this is a small part of a galaxy that's a small part of a big universe, and there's a lot of stuff going on beyond our comprehension. Just know your little part in it, and that's why they're here. And they use this technology, this Lego block technology, to accomplish their goals. As far as the concerns about World War III, it's constantly being reiterated to me. It's small bads, not big bads. They are doing everything that they can to make sure that the real big bads don't happen. There is a gradient, a dividing line between what a big bad is and a small bad is. And I can tell you right now that what I think is a little bad differs from what the domain commander thinks what a little bad is. Okay. How it differs, I have no idea, but I know it differs. So they just say, I just want you to keep things a little bad. Don't worry too much about it. Don't get too upset about it. They got everything underhand. Okay, fine. I hope that this video itself was of interest to you and that you learned something from it. It's nothing that you can practically put into your day-to-day lives, but it gives you an insight in how things fit together. The bottom line, the bottom line of this entire talk here is that quanta is comprised of quanta building blocks, which go by the name of branes or strings, depending upon whatever the prevalent theory goes. And the quanta is nothing more than an ordered arrangement of these branes or strings, these building blocks that repeat over and over again. And when I talk about quanta, that's what I'm talking about. Okay? Just to get some terms and terminology clean and clear. We'll talk more about this in the future. Hopefully I won't bore you as much as I bored you in this time, I'm sure. I'm sure this one was probably my most uninspired and boring video of them all, but I'm sorry about that, guys. But sometimes you need to know this stuff, right? Okay. With that going, I just want you to know, I want you to have a great day. I hope you're getting something from out of all this stuff. And remember, people, in every way possible, I believe in you.